Bedford Evangelical Church. If you've been here many times before, or if you've never been here before, you're not sure, you're very welcome and lovely to have you with us this evening. And I am very thankful for my good friend Graham Albans, who's come over from sunny Bedford. Sunny Bedford?
Well, I don't know. I think you've got all the sun here now.
It's just locked down.
The worst thing about Bedford is that it's the most landlocked county. Bedford is the most landlocked county. That hurts my heart. So I just feel closer. I don't think we are close to the beach, but we're closer than Bedford is. So
we've got South Wales and that's all of that. And tonight, Graham, I feel that I am channeling my inner Michael Parkinson, Terry Wogan, even, but above all, Cilla Black. Okay, that's what I'm going for. But it's lovely to have Graham with us this evening, and my privilege to just chat with him really as we kind of overhear a conversation and hear a bit about Graham's life, his story, and this kind of shift that's happened in his life. So, Graham, just if you would, I will say, we're going to chat, we're going to have an interview, and then T's and C's will come round. And then after that, there will just be a brief opportunity for people to ask Graham any questions you want, anything at all. Nothing's on the table.
Cut the live stream.
So, cut that. So do be thinking as we just chat about any questions you might have to fire at Graham over a cup of tea, so to speak. But just help us to place you a bit, Graham. You said you live in Bedford, family, work, what's life about?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a 2-hour drive from Bedford, which is where I live with my wife Jo and our 3 kids. We've got Will, who's 9, Charlotte, who's 6, and Archie, who's a nutcase. He's 3, and he's channeling 13-year-old energy already, all in one little bundle. So yeah, we live there. I never knew where Bedford was until I met Jo. She's from there. She grew up there. I'm from Lincoln originally. Would never have heard of Bedford even if it wasn't for Jo. Yeah.
What do you do to relax, to unwind? What?
Oh, mate, we've got 3 kids. There is no. Okay. I'll tell you what the things I used to do. I used to have things called hobbies. You might be familiar, but now we have kids instead. So I coach our boys' football team. I go for runs. I play the drums. I'll do anything to give myself 5 minutes by myself. But yeah, no, a bit of sport. I love to watch football. I love to play football. Anything that kind of gets my body moving is a good break from my brain hurting most of the time.
Sure. And so you say you're from Lincoln. So just if you can, just take us right back to the beginning of your story. Tell us about growing up. Who's been past Lincoln before? It's the sort of place you go past, isn't it?
Yeah, past and keep going.
The cathedral, the lights, and all that. I tried to get you. I wanted to get you a little gift, and I tried to get you a fibre optic Lincoln cathedral.
I would have kept it for all time.
And then a friend said, just get him some Lincolnshire sausages, which I also to do as well. But anyway, we'll sort that out.
So we're clear. There's no gift.
There's no.
Right,
As it stands, there's no gift, but there's some fantastic cakes. So just tell us a bit about life growing up.
Yeah.
What family and growing up there.
Yeah, Lincoln is one of those places where perhaps if you're a teenager who lives in a place like this, you would say, I grow up there and I leave as soon as possible. Lincoln was that place for me. Lovely childhood growing up, but couldn't wait to kind of get out. Love going back to visit now. But really, so growing up in Lincoln, I was only child. Mum and Dad grew up in Lincoln or the surrounding villages, and never moved further from the Shire. I was the first person to really go and venture further than Lincoln. My mum and dad never went to uni or anything like that. They just grew up in Lincoln, worked in Lincoln, had family in Lincoln. They're still in Lincoln. And so for me to ever have come to Mickfield, oh my goodness, you're in Mickfield. Do you know what it's further than the boundary borders. So I grew up there, and actually mum and dad, both Christians, so church was just part of our regular weekly habit and routine. Learnt, a lot about the stories of the Bible from growing up in church. You know, the good guys always beat the bad guys with stones and hit them on the head like giants and that. So you kind of learn all those stories. And yeah, I went to school. Just a fairly normal childhood life, really, apart from on the Sundays, I went to church, and then the Mondays, I didn't really tell anybody that I went to church on the Monday. Yeah, that was important to me. That was important to me to keep those two things separate. Yeah, I had my schoolmates, and then I had my church mates, and as long as they never met each other, everything was going to be okay.
Mum and Dad, like work-wise and stuff, what do they?
Yeah, Dad works for the local council, or did, in highways and planning, boob, and Mum was a librarian for a bit. She was a museum worker for a bit. She the Lincolnshire Life Museum was like the go-to tourist attraction. She worked in a bank for a bit. So Mum had sort of just odd jobs, and then but as far as I can remember, Mum was at home with me as a kid. Yeah, as a kid.
And then somehow you go from Lincoln, growing up there, to, well, we know because we've all seen the flyer, and that's why we're here, being a BBC producer. Can you just tell us how you get from there to there?
Yeah, right. So cut to the end of the long story first is that from being just a lonely kid in rural Lincolnshire to finding myself, which was probably 4 or 5 years ago, working in London at Radio 2 as a BBC radio producer. Radio 2 at the time, just changed recently, but at the time was the biggest radio station in the UK and the biggest radio station in Europe, actually this side of the Atlantic. And the breakfast show was where I was working. So on any radio station, the breakfast show is the one. Like it's the king of the station. And so for many years, I was working with Chris Evans. He had a listenership of almost 10 million at one point, 9.98 million, which is a really annoying number. My OCD was going crazy for that 0.02. So a big fat show. And so from ordinary childhood in Lincoln to kind of working as the producer on this mega kind of radio show in terms of size of audience was quite a contrast. I sort of grew up. I remember my first time I'd walked into a radio studio was as a drummer in a band. The local BBC Lincolnshire station had a new music show. We went and played our music, and as soon as I went in, I was like, I don't want to be in a band anymore. I want to be on the radio. This is much cooler. Like the idea that you could be sat in a little room with a microphone and a bunch of music, and to communicate and connect with, and to play music to a whole bunch of people you didn't know but were listening. That's cool, that's really exciting. And I was hooked, absolutely hooked. And so I just kept turning up to that show saying, can I listen to the demo CDs? Can I make the tea, open the mail, do whatever? And my first paid job on that radio station was doing the farming show. BBC Radio Lincolnshire, Sunday morning, farming and gardening. Which was just brilliant. And I was just happy to be there. And you cut live we had lambing live, right? So this was like, if you got to present the lambing live show, you basically made it at BBC Radio Lincolnshire. And you fade it up, and you could turn up the volume. Like you got a mixing desk at the back there, you turn up the volume, and you go lambing. Right, anyway, that was that. And then I went to university, and university kind of student radio scene is a good gateway into the industry as a career. Did student radio, and that was in Leeds. I always knew that most of the industry was down in London. So we moved, when we got married, to near London, Bedford, where we are now, commutable. And I started working. I had a 6-month contract working as a runner, essentially, low-down production job on the Chris Evans breakfast show. That 6 months got extended to 9 months. That then turned into nearly 9 years, purely because I was in the right place, right time, worked hard, loved the work, was happy to get up at 3 a.m. to go and start work at 4:30, and loved it. And so built that kind of up from being a person who answered the request lines to being an assistant producer to then producing the Radio 2 Breakfast Show, which for that line of work is kind of that's, I don't know how to put it without, it was a chunky job. People would look at that job and go, yeah, that's good. You know, there's not many rungs up on the ladder on that particular line of work.
So you got to the top of
that particular ladder. Yeah. And I don't know if any of you would have listened to Chris Evans kind of back in the day on Radio 1 in the 90s. Some of you are old enough for that, definitely. Safe bet. Some of you might have heard him on Radio 2. He then left, and that was quite major. Because Radio 2 Breakfast Show hosts don't really leave. So for them, that is a chunky job. But we had the opportunity then to relaunch the Radio 2 Breakfast Show with Zoe Ball, who only just left recently, and some of you may have been listening to on the mornings there. And the opportunity to relaunch the Radio 2 Breakfast Show is like a once-in-a-career thing. And I was in the right place at the right time. And Zoe was brilliant, still is fantastic. But the opportunity to kind of like, let's reshape this absolutely. You mentioned all those greats, Terry Wogan, the Radio 2 Breakfast Show, Ken Bruce, Chris Evans, the giant of broadcasting that he was and is, and then to kind of relaunch this precious thing called the Radio 2 Breakfast Show was a moment.
Tell us a little bit about, you started to say a little bit about your day. When did it start, and what was your day like? Working for the BBC, working on the BBC Radio. What was your day like?
My alarm would go off at 3 a.m. I never got used to that. It's horrible. It's horrible. No one wants to be woken up at 3 a.m. I'd be on a train by 3:45. We'd be in the studio. We'd go on air at 6:30. With someone like Chris, what I love about live radio, and still love now, even though I don't work in it, is anything can happen. Like the Daily Show, you're responding to things that have happened in the news. You're kind of responding to listeners texting, emailing, writing in. Anything can happen whilst you're on the air, and I just love that buzz. I love that we could go anywhere with this narrative of the morning. Yeah. No. But some days where you're like, I was never sat like this. You'll be sat like this. Like, what's gonna? There was some day, I remember, on a serious note, there was some funny stuff that went wrong, but there was some stuff that went like, okay, there's been a significant, like a famous death. I remember, David Bowie dying, and you go, how do we? Now, David Bowie is a significant musical figure in the lives of the Radio 2 audience, so how do we treat this? I remember being on air when the news that COVID had come to our shores. Right, okay. That changes things a bit. There are significant moments. My team were on the air when they had to announce the Queen dying. It's like, how do you treat these significant moments when you're live and anything can happen? All the way through to, I've got stories of guests turning up to be on the breakfast show, still having not been at home the night before. Do you know what I'm saying? So they'd gone to their album launch party. I remember, okay. Should we? So, so is this? One thing happened where Suggs from Madness. Do you ever listen to Madness? And he arrived about an hour earlier than he was meant to be at the station. I thought that's odd, and it's because he hadn't been home, and he'd had the album launch the night before, and he'd come straight to the interview. Not been home or been to sleep, and he walked through, and I'm like, I don't think we can put you on the radio. You can't speak properly, you can't walk properly, and Saturday into Sunday morning here. That's why. We had to talk to the record label and say you're gonna have to take him home, and so we did, and. So yeah.
What's it like? It's not my. Just you must have been meeting celebrities all the time. What's that like? that become normal, or?
it, you realise quite quickly that everyone's doing a job, right? You and I, if you've had any work in life, you've got a skill that you've worked hard at, and now you get to earn a living from. Famous people are just that. They've got a skill, a talent, a gift. They've worked hard at it all their life, mostly, or had auto-tune. And they're getting paid for it. And that payment gives them a certain level of fame and profile and riches. But everyone poos. Do you know what I mean? And I learned that when Taylor Swift walked out of a portaloo that I was going into at Glastonbury one time. And I just thought everyone poos. So you do.
Speaking of that, what are the toilets like at the BBC? Are they?
They're all clean. Clean. No, they're just clean. They're just standard. Yeah, it's just like It's like the BBC itself. No luxury, but just straight down the line.
The canteen, the food. What's that like?
The canteen is also one of those places where you realise everyone's normal. So you'd be there, hash browns. If you ever find yourself randomly in the BBC canteen, get the hash browns because they know what they're doing with a hash brown. But you'd sit down with your beans and your hash browns, and you'd look across and you go, okay, there's loads of people who I see on TV every day. You know, there's Hugh Edwards. But there's Hugh Edwards like sat having his, or there's so-and-so from Radio 1, or there's all these people you see on the telly just in the queue for the hash browns. So everyone's very normal.
Lots of people like hash browns.
But yeah, got to get them right.
So you sort of got about halfway through your day then, so you're on air at that point, and then so when you you're obviously doing breakfast show, so you wrap up in, when's that?
Yeah, we come off air about 9:30. We were a bit of a team debrief, and when I was working on the show, most people would say, "Oh, that's great, you're home by 10:30." I'm like, nope. There's a lot of planning then that goes into the next day and the next week and the week ahead. So you'll be thinking about, well, who are we going to have on the show tomorrow or on Friday? And the life of a producer is kind of doing all the stuff that you don't really hear. So if you listen to the radio, you hear the person speaking to you, and that's your friend on the radio. But what you don't hear is all the background stuff. You don't hear the previous day's prep or the previous week. That you'll be booking guests for next week. You'll be writing interviews. You'll be researching them and what they're here to promote and talk about. You'll be thinking about what are the funny little quirky features we want to do tomorrow to respond to news stories today, and thinking ahead to what are the things coming up in the summer that some of the festivals we might find ourselves at. I found myself again growing up in Lincoln. Me and my friends who would be in local bands. I said I went to the BBC first with a band. We'd all be in these local bands playing little local gigs together, and we'd watch Glastonbury on the telly thinking, that's amazing, Glastonbury. And then I was just so blessed, fortunate enough to find myself then doing radio shows from Glastonbury 4 years in a row. Like, wow, even just getting to go to Glastonbury once would be a mad thing. But here I am 4 years not getting paid to be, and I'm on the pyramid stage. I'm on the pyramid, and I'm watching, and we're broadcasting, and so that was that was one of those moments where, I was in the village with my friend William, and we were watching Glastonbury, and actually William now is involved in the music industry, working with acts who are playing, and I'm here broadcasting the acts who are playing. This is a mad sort of thing. But you'd be thinking ahead, so even every week in the winter, you'd be thinking, right, what are the things we're going to do in the summer, some of the bigger events. So the life of a radio producer is basically everything that you don't hear behind the scenes. And if you do hear a producer on the air, I mean, something's gone really badly wrong.
Did you do that?
Yeah, once. I can't remember quite what happened, but I did find myself having to fill a short slot. I can't remember what happened, but I can't really say what it was.
We appreciate that. And just tell us a bit about the freebies, right? Because this is what my wife Catherine remembers, right? You were when we were in Bedford, and she'd be around there. You come away with random free people send things in and stuff. What?
Yeah.
Tell us about the freebies.
Freebies. Oh my goodness.
You mentioned the jumpsuit, but
I have no memory of this jumpsuit. Pardon?
Chicken pie?
Pies, plenty of pie. I don't remember a particular jumpsuit, but I remember pies. So Chris Evans, back in the 90s, was on telly with TFI Friday, but when he was on the Radio 2 Breakfast Show, we did TFI Pie Day, right? So he would do it quite regularly, actually, because it was an excuse for companies to send us free pies. Great. So you'd be sat in the office and try and get on with your work, ready for the next day, and but there's another pie delivery. So TFI Pie Day, we'd just have loads of people sending pies. I'd come out our freezer. I'm pretty sure, this is like 8 or 9 years ago, I'm pretty sure our freezer now still has pies from TFI Pie Day. It might not have them, the freezer might not have the pies, but our larder definitely still has the jams and the marmalades, because again, it's just random stuff people would send to Chris, and it's like, I can't take all this home. But yeah, things from that to gig tickets and the opportunities to go different places, and yeah, freebies are plenty. People just send their stuff, and we couldn't talk about it on the radio because that's commercial promotion. So it just sort of
Were they hoping
gets
that
tight.
maybe one?
No. Yeah, exactly that. Really, I tell you what was some of the nice freebies were, to be honest with you, some of the most amazing experiences in my life were with Chris Evans. He really was a bit of an uncle figure to me. He took me under his wing from those early days of getting into radio production, and developed me in my career, but also like we would end up having sleepovers at his house as a team, or he would treat me and Joe to a weekend away in a nice hotel or whatever. I did get a couple of pictures, just if that helps. So this is actually during one of a live radio show that we did in front of the BBC, where he was an incredibly generous man, still is, and he'd auctioned off these opportunities for children in need for people to come and drive his collection of cars. But in terms of like freebies and perks, like that would include us. We would get to go for drives in these ridiculous Ferraris and Aston Martins. That my first time in a Ferrari was with Chris driving a hot lap in a 1962 short wheelbase Ferrari GTO. If that means something to anybody, you're a better man than me, but that's what he said, and apparently that's special. So that was a lot of incredible experience. The freebies were the experiences. So this is a broadcast we did. That's Camilla. Obviously, that's Camilla, but it was from a palace. We're at Buckingham Palace doing these shows and thinking, these are the places you watch on telly, and these are the people you see on screen. And now here we are, Camilla. So my job at this particular moment was to make sure Camilla was in the right place at the right time to do her bit on the radio. She was late for this moment because she was sat on a throne. Like, we're all normal people. And when you mentioned about freebies, this is kind of why I wanted to come to in the pictures. This came to mind. So Chris is in the blue t-shirt there, and as a freebie, as a real treat, he'd taken some of the guys from the team on a bit of a weekend away, a bank holiday weekend, and quite last minute he said, look, whatever you got planned, cancel it. I'm flying the team to Nice. We're going to get on his yacht. And so we went for 3 nights on this 3-story, I mean, you can't call it a boat. It's a floating hotel, basically. There was 9 of us guests and 12 staff, right? So you've got 2 chefs, 2 water sports instructors, and it's like, and he footed the bill for the lot. So in terms of freebies, you can keep your jams and your pies, send me a boat. And this thing, so Chris was just an incredibly generous man. And this photo is powerful to me because where we're headed to there is, the harbour there is Saint-Tropez in the south of France. And Saint-Tropez, if you know much about it, is one of the most expensive sort of, town, village, harbour, I don't know. It's one of the most expensive places you can go and spend your money. And we're on this floating hotel, like millions of pounds worth of floating boats. And as you've seen before, Chris owns this fleet of Ferraris and multiple homes. He is by far the richest person I've ever met, probably apart from Queen Camilla. She's got a bubble too as well. But in terms of people that I work with or know, Chris is up there in the higher echelons of wealth. And this photo is powerful to me because even though we're on millions of pounds worth of dinghy, floating towards one of the most expensive places in Europe to spend your money. The whole journey, we're going past other mega yachts. And he's going, see that one there? That's worth 3 times as this. I couldn't afford it. See that one there? That belongs to Bono. If I could, I'd get that one. You see that one there? That's Roman Abramovich's yacht. Way better than this. God, this looks like nothing compared to that. And I thought, whatever level you reach, there's still something more. He is the richest man I've ever come across. He's got wildly more than anything you or I will ever... Well, I don't know you all, but I don't see any Ferraris in the car park. So whatever heights of fame and riches, there is still someone who's doing better than you, who's got something more, in a better position than you, or has more financial security. Whatever level you reach, there's always a dissatisfaction. Never satisfied for a bit, maybe happy for a bit, but never quite fully satisfied. And I found that to be true, I guess, in my own life as well. Like, why was I not satisfied to just do Lambing Live on BBC Radio Lincolnshire? Well, it's because I knew there's another bigger show to work on. Okay, well, you got your first paid job at the BBC. Well, why were you not satisfied with that? Well, it's because there's another rung of the ladder. You got in Radio 2 as like a letter opener. That's amazing. Not many people get to, oh yeah, but there's a producer job. And then there's a producer of a bigger show. So even as I reflect on that time, that kind of what's next, that kind of desire for something more, whether that's another rung of the ladder or another few grand on the bank account statement or another thing that you own and collect or another, there's just always, on a high level like Chris's yachts or just on a low level like my career stability or my career ladder or how I build my life, how I build my security around me with my job and my home and my life. There's always just something more. I'm satisfied for a bit and then I set more goals. Do you know what I mean?
And this isn't just something you're seeing in him and others around you. You're seeing this at that point. You're seeing this in the sense that you've gone for more and more, and you're loving it. I guess you're loving the job, but it's not.
No, I'm not there thinking, gosh, I'm having an existential crisis. But I'm very aware in myself that whatever level I reach, there's always another level to reach for. But that translates out to all kinds of parts of life. This is a massive tangent. I'm sorry about this. You came to hear stories about like Zoe Ball on a bog or something. But I noticed this actually applies to so much of my life. And the lives of people I now get to have conversations with, is whatever's in the bank account, there's always there's another level up for my own security. However we've built the business, well, we've got to grow it again. You notice it with people who are kind of serial daters, date different people, well, lovely girl, but and then you move on. Didn't quite meet all my needs, wasn't quite fully satisfied, and so that's over and we've moved on to the next. And so what I noticed about Chris and a few of the other kind of famouses is that even when you're in a position that you or I might think, oh, we've arrived now we've made it, there is this inherent human thing that whatever level you reach for, there's another level to reach. I've probably noticed that more on reflection than at the time, but certainly, like, that's what drives you, isn't it? It's what keeps you going. It's what keeps you waking up and going, yeah, we'll go again. So there's an element where it drives humans along, keeps you going. There's always something to live for. And yet when we think we've reached that thing, we're never totally fully satisfied for long.
The next thing. Now I'm conscious that the next thing eventually in your story, all of a sudden you're not BBC producer and you're a pastor in Bedford. And so I'd love to know what happened, Graham. You know, how do you get from where, as you say, you're loving it, you know, you're at the top of the game and all. How did you get from there to where you are now? I mean, were you a Christian at that point or not?
Yeah. Well, let me answer that bit first. So was I a Christian at that point? I'll take you right back to Lincoln. The church that I grew up in with my mum and dad was just a small church in a village. And I remember from a young age thinking, Jesus, it sounds like someone that is quite special. And I probably need to have him in my life. I don't quite have it all figured out because I'm really quite young at this point, but I at least know that I need to start getting to know about Jesus. The church that we went to had a thing where every week you'd go to the front and the leader of the church would say a little prayer for you, say a little blessing. I don't think you probably do this here, but we had like this bit that you'd kneel on, and there'd be these tiles on the floor. And the tiles were black and white, black, white patterned. And every week as a young boy and then a teenager in this church, I would kneel for this blessing, prayer, whatever it was. And I'd look at these tiles and I'd think, have I had a black tile week or a white tile week? Like, have I been a good boy, white tile, or a naughty boy, right? And then when you get to being a teenager, you go, oh my goodness, I've been a naughty boy every week. These are all black tile weeks. And even on the weeks that I thought, oh, that was at least grey, but there were no grey tiles. So even on the weeks where you thought, it's actually been a little bit, I've been a good boy this week mostly, if you're honest with yourself, especially when you're a teenage boy, yeah, okay, no, there are bits of my week that have made it not completely white tile, not completely pure. You know, everything that you have said, everything that you've thought, these definitely aren't all white tile weeks. And I remember thinking to myself, do I deserve to be in church? Is it a black tile week or white tile week? And after a while I thought, it's all black tile weeks. And I didn't really have anybody to talk to about that. It's probably, again, a good difference between your church here now and my church there then, is that I know for a fact you love to talk about questions, and when people are grappling with issues of their weeks and faith and whatever else, you're here to talk about stuff. But I didn't have that. I didn't have anybody to kind of ask my big questions to. You know, big, chunky questions of, well, what do I do with my every week seems to be not perfectly white. What do I do with that? Questions like, is the Bible really? When I open the Bible, what is this? Is it is this fairy stories? Because it sounds like fairy stories. Or is it reliable? Questions like the real basic stuff, like, did Jesus really exist? Because I hear a lot of good stuff about him. I know from a child, I want him to be my friend, but again, he sounds a little bit fairy story. Questions like, if he did exist, did he really die? And what's that got to do with me? Questions like, if he really died, did he really rise again? Because again, you spend any amount of time vaguely near a church, you hear the Easter story as a kid, and Jesus died on a sunset cross, obviously, because that's what you see at Easter cards. Then he rises again, and you go, that sounds mad. Doesn't it? Like, that's ridiculous. Did that actually happen? As a teenager, and a young 20s actually, as far as that, no one's kind of asked those questions to. And it felt to me, I knew enough about Christianity to go, the whole thing lives or dies on whether Jesus died and rose again. Whether he actually, literally, physically, historically was resurrected and appeared to people. And it sounds nuts, Rich. Do you know what I mean? If you're living in that there London, working in your BBC, you know, and your jams, you go, that sounds nuts. And yet, the whole of Christianity is founded on not a set of good moral teachings from someone who lived 2,000 years ago, but the idea that Jesus rose from the dead. And so to me, that seemed like the button to press. We need to find out that. And so I found people who would help me find out the answers to that. At the time, Jo was pregnant with our first son. And becoming a father made me feel a real necessity to push into that. I'd been basically spoon-fed my Christian understanding. I'd just been kind of given it, you know, without any opportunity to answer questions. And if I was going to hand that on to my son, I needed to know for myself that it was true. Because if it's not, then I'm not going to raise him believing something that's not true. It's bad parenting, for a start. And so that period of going, right, what do I pass on to him? How do I answer some of these big questions that have gone unanswered? At this point, I'm mid-20s. Even though I'd grown up in church, I had nowhere to ask these major questions to.
And all the while, what's Jo making all of this? There's something going on, isn't it? Or at least in your mind.
Yeah.
Did she know that this was rattling around? What does she make of it at this point?
Yeah. Jo is very steady and encouraging, right? So what you've got to know about me and Jo is I'm up and down like a flipping yo-yo, and Jo is like rock solid like the foundations of a house. So she's been a Christian since she was very young, grown up, mum and dad Christians, grown up in church, great. We get married, she's sturdy, but I have this period in my mid-20s where she's pregnant and I'm questioning everything. Massive doubts. I wouldn't say crisis, but I would say if I was going to push these buttons of big questions, I was going to do it properly. And if I wasn't satisfied that there were good answers to big questions, is the Bible reliable historically? Did Jesus really die and rise again? If I came away and going, I think this is a load of rubbish, nonsense, it's all made up, then I said to Jo at the time, like, I don't know what our life looks like from here on in. We go to church. My family are Christians. Her mum and dad are Christians. And yet I'm basically saying I'm not willing to keep following something that I think might not be true. What does that look like? So Jo is steady. And she knew that she had to encourage me to press into those doubts and questions. On the surface, she was very calm. So your question of how was she? Very calm. On the inside, I can imagine, how does our life look like if we walk away from the church? If we walk away from something that's been so foundational to our upbringings and our life now? But you've got to, haven't you? I mean, if you push hard and find the whole thing to be made up, it'd be crazy to just blindly follow along with something that you'd investigated and found was unsatisfactorily nonsense.
And bring that little boy into that. Yeah.
So she was calm on the outside, mate.
So how does all this, all of this, how does it resolve? What happened? How did you get? I guess you must have done. Did you get answers to those? How did you do it?
I assumed that it would all be like a bit of a house of cards. That you don't you dare move one of these cards because the whole thing will fall over. Don't question it. Don't touch it. Don't breathe near it, because if one of the cards goes, the whole thing falls down. And actually, I found that the more I pushed, the deeper I went, and the harder I pushed, actually, the more robust it all became. So I was, again, very blessed, very fortunate to have a couple of the guys who work at the church we were at, and are still at now, take time to go, okay, let's just get all the questions out on the table, and let's just meet up every week, once a week, and just keep working through them. And he gave me, someone we know mutually, there's a guy called Martin, he just gave me the freedom to ask those questions and to go for it, and to almost be semi-aggressive with it, And he didn't get defensive or dismissive, but he welcomed that and he wrestled with those questions with me. He gave me short things to read, short books, little books for a little brain, right? He gave me little things to read. He sent me little YouTube clips to watch. He would actually just invest in me. And he would share those same struggles and questions, like, yeah, that's hard. Didn't just have easy giveaway answers. And that was probably a good 6 months. And it could have gone on longer. But we particularly focused on, did the resurrection happen? Is the Easter story true? Did someone called Jesus actually exist, live, die on a cross, apparently? What's that got to do with anything? Because Christians bang on about it. And then actually physically, historically rise from the dead. And really that's if you can look at that and go, there's a lot about Christianity I might never understand. There's a lot about life I might never understand. But that seems important. And if I can press that hard and see whether or not it's robust, then that's good. And Martin gave me the space and time. There's a lot of other questions as well, but we really honed in on that core kind of first importance issue. Yeah. And now I work for the church, so.
That's simple.
Yeah, simple, that.
Just like that. So what do you do with, you talk about these white tiles, black tiles, grey, all this, because that must have been kind of niggling away, certainly there when you were younger. Where does that get you to?
Yeah.
How does that resolve?
Yeah, so the thing that I came to realise through that kind of pushing into my skepticism, my doubts, my big questions, was that Christianity isn't just about, oh, now I've got the answers. It's not an intellectual exercise. So can I intellectually get my head round that in history there really was someone called Jesus who really did die on a cross? We've got really good evidence for that from outside the Bible. These aren't just things you go, oh, Christians believe it's in the Bible, and so I can't deal with that. Is there stuff outside the Bible that accredits that and testifies to the same historical truth that... So yeah, there are things where I can learn with my head and understand the truth, the reality of that. But what do you do with those black and white tile weeks? Well, then it becomes a heart thing. Because I can intellectually understand that a man died on a cross, but I need that for my heart. Because what he was doing on the cross wasn't just getting binned off by the powers that be. He wasn't just showing some sort of example of sacrificial love. That the Bible says that he was taking all of my black tiles. He was taking all of my black weeks, or anything that would spoil what would otherwise be a good white week. It's as if all the thoughts, words, actions that would put me in the kind of moral black, if you like, he was taking on himself, he was pinning on himself, he was putting on him and ditching it off on the cross. He was binning it, he was destroying it. As he gets destroyed on the cross, it's like all of my mess gets binned off with him. And so I am left with only white tiles. I'm left with only, he pays the check that I can't pay off. If Chris Evans had taken us on that mega trip, we were drinking bottles of wine that were more expensive than the Kia car, the hatchback that I own, right? And then if he'd turned around the end of that 3-day trip and gone, oh, now you've got to pay for the expense. We had 12 staff and you've got to pay for it. I'd be screwed. You'd be screwed. We'll all be screwed. The Bible says that there's a payment to be made for the mess that we've made. And like the 3-day trip with Chris Evans, I can't pay it. If God turned around to me now and said, you've got to pay for all those things you've said, thought and done that have made a mess of life in whatever way, you know, I am morally bankrupt, as it were. I've got nothing in the bank to pay for that. And so what's the solution? The solution is that Jesus pays it off for me. In the same way that Chris takes all that cost on himself, he paid for that 3-day trip so I don't have to. And that was a nice trip. Jesus paid the cost of my mess, of my black tile weeks, so that I don't have to. Now that's not just an intellectual exercise. At that point, that's a heart. For me, that's a heart-moving thing.
And that got you then. That
and continues to.
Yeah.
Even as I talk about it now, Rich, this isn't just something that you understand. You don't get your head around some facts about Christianity and then brilliant.
And you're a hard evidence. You're saying you want the hard evidence.
I want it.
All that stuff. But there's something more. Yeah.
It's very moving to me that God would do that, because I've got nothing. I can't pay I can't pay a penny back of the moral debt that I'm in. Because growing up as a teenager in church, you rack up some moral debt. Being a 20-something, living and working in London, you rack up some moral debt. Being a 40, 50, 60-old something with the internet and with greed and with... None of us are living pure white tile weeks. And we might squint our eyes and blur a bit and go, oh, it's basically white. We know that there are bits of black in every white tile week. And there is a price to pay for that. That's not something we can massively get into now, but it moves me from understanding. It moves my heart to go in. Instead of me having to pay that off, Jesus willingly, voluntarily paid it for me on the cross. Not because he had to, didn't have to, but out of a deep love for me, for people, for anyone. And he didn't have to do it, but he chose to do it. Oh man, that's not an intellectual thing. That warms my heart.
So you say it moves you. Is that what moved you out of the BBC? Was it like you got that and you went, right, I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and be a pastor in Bedford. Is that what happened?
Not quite. Yeah, no. Look, like I said, I had the top job, top rung of the ladder. Out of that was anything above what I was in was middle management. I wasn't interested. So top rung. I didn't want to leave, really. I didn't have to leave. There was no glass ceilings. I knew what the next 10 to 20 years of career progression would look like. Loved my job. If that hasn't come over this evening, I don't know what will, but loved my job, loved the people. There was at no point where I felt like I'm going to ditch this off and leave this behind. In fact, the first conversation I had with someone who said, you ever thought about working for a church? I literally laughed in their face and said, no, my job's amazing. Have you seen that picture of me on a boat? It's great. And I remember a conversation with someone who said, look, there's no money and there's no job, but if there was, would you consider working for a church? And I just thought, that's boring. That's never been on my radar. None of my family work for a church. Never been. It just sounds dire, if I'm honest with you. And I was living a great job. Loved it. And so I said no. I said, there's just no, I don't have any longing for that whatsoever. We were just about to launch the Zoe Ball Breakfast Show. Wanted to do that. About a year later, that person had obviously planted some sort of seed in my mind. Because I couldn't get it off my mind. And what was on my mind was the idea that someone had taken the time to help me wrestle with some big questions and big doubts. And it had been life-changing for me. I can't be the only one with big questions and doubts. I wonder if there's something I could do with my life that would help others with the similar questions, similar thoughts, similar backgrounds. About a year later, the same person said, there is some money and there is a job. Would you be interested? And they must have caught me on a high. Yeah. Well, she did, yeah. I was like, let's go, sign me up. And Joe was like, whoa, you're about to ditch off your your well-paid job. Like, let's not do this too early. So I took it, and it was a job. It is a job. I'm in this job now. That one of the main things about it is helping others, like someone helped me, with questions. We run sessions, open kind of Q&A sessions for anyone to come to and invite their mates along to, who might be asking those similar questions that I was asking, or any question that goes. And part of my job now is doing little bits and pieces of support in the community, reaching new people who need the support and love of churches in our community. Part of my job now is actually helping Christians to answer those kind of big questions, so that when they're in conversations with a mate or a colleague or whatever who would perhaps mock their faith in the same way that I got mocked for mine in the BBC early days, has an answer, has a good. And so I think I ended up saying yes. I think that was received with some mixed, you hand your notice in, you say, I'm off now, and everyone goes, oh wow, are you off to work for? So two people said, so when do you start at Spotify? Because you usually kind of start at either at Spotify, which is kind of the big streaming service, or you go to Apple, or one person said, oh, have you been poached to go and work at a different radio station? And I said, no, I'm going to leave the biggest national radio show on the biggest national radio station. I'm going to go and work for a local church. What? And some people are like, don't get it. Some people kind of give you this sort of sideways look and don't really say anything about it. Like, oh, that's nice. So we're never going to speak ever again. And then some people really, they got it. They saw how that made sense with kind of my own journey, why I had a passion for it. And then, yeah, walking out of the BBC building on my last day was weird. Because I'd left behind what was a lovely job to go and do something fairly unknown, helping people in their own journeys that I'd kind of experienced myself, and I can understand why not a lot of people would get that. This wasn't a BBC, I'm done with this place, I'm off to go and work in my local town. This was it felt like a risk. And to a certain extent, I don't know really what each year or couple of years looks like in this job. But I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. And I love it because I know how much I benefited from having someone just grapple with those questions. I love chewing things over with other people now.
Graham, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that with us. Give him a round of applause.
Oh,
I know you don't want the round of applause because you want it to go to him.
Do you know what, Rich? In all honesty, if my story can somehow point to Jesus, and for anyone to be interested to find out more about him, you know, we'll do a Q&A. You can ask me whatever about celeb stories and what led me to believe what I believe now and do what I do now. Ask whatever you want. But the most important question to ask will really be to this guy on Sunday morning or Sunday after that, or to the friend who invited you, or whatever it is. Like, yeah, don't clap for me. I appreciate what you're saying, but really find out more about Jesus, because you've got to know for sure whether it's a load of made up nonsense or whether it's life-changingly good.
So we're just going to take a moment to give you all the opportunity to ask Graham anything you'd like to ask him. I'm holding this mic because my mic doesn't work, but we will also have a roving microphone, okay? So if you've got a question, Will is going to find you and he's going to give you the mic, and then you can be heard and everyone can hear your question. Also, just to say, on the back table next to the cake, which is handy, there's all sorts of bits and bobs that are free to take away. All sorts of books and little bits and pieces that you might want to take away, including, I found them in the cupboard, so to speak, just this afternoon, or today or yesterday, whenever it was, this book, which is written by the guy that Graham was talking about, the guy that helped him with his questions, spend that time, sat down with him. He's called Martin Salter, and he's written this just very short book, What's It All About? Answering the Biggest Questions of Life. So there's 3 copies there. I've got one of them, but they're free to a good home, and there's all sorts of other bits out there as well. I am going to mention it. He won't want to, but I will say Graham has written this book here, which we've mentioned before at Mickfield, How One Weekend Can Give You Everything You Ever Wanted. And you get a bit more of Graham's story, and also thrown in free of charge, you get a whole load of other stories of other people's life situations, and some answers to those biggest questions. So it's a great book. They're all free. Please do. I want to see that table empty, all the cake, and all that's it, and all the books at the end. But I'll stop waffling. Fire away. Anyone got a question for Graham?
Graham, very interesting story, a bit like my own. What I wondered is, what has this done to the relationship you had with celebrity? Have they accepted it?
What has this done for the relationship?
With you and the celebrity that you enjoy?
In terms of my job change? Yeah, great, thanks for asking. I handed in my notice, and the 3-month period between me handing it in and leaving, I had more conversations about my faith in that 3 months than I had in the whole 10 years I was at Radio 2. the celebs that you meet, the guests that come in and out, they're here 1 minute, they're gone the next. There's no real, you're not sharing your life with them. But the celebs who are there as presenters, the Chris Evans, Zoe Ball, the kind of the main two that I work with, you're day in, day out with them, early mornings, you are sharing your life with them. And so those kind of relationships with celebs will be slightly more meaningful and open the doors for whatever kind of conversations. But in that respect, it's no different from any ordinary colleague that you or I or anybody would have. It's people you're sharing your daily life with, seeing you at your best, seeing you at your worst, seeing you when you're struggling, seeing you when you're winning. And that opens the doors for... So I would say, actually, I still keep in touch with a couple of those people. From the production team, as well as people like Zoe. And they're interested to know how work is going now. And so the relationship hasn't particularly changed, apart from I don't see them every morning. Apart from that, they're more interested to hear about my work, which is tied up with everything we've talked about. So yeah, thank you.
Other questions?
Hiya. I was wondering, your role as a pastor, perhaps you could elaborate more on the church that you're working for, and are you pastoring a whole church, or are you a youth pastor, or what does that role entail?
Thank you. So our church is, we are very blessed to have a staff team. I'm part of the leadership team as well as being on staff, and each of our leaders has a different zone of the church life to look after. So we have a guy who kind of leads the team. He's kind of pastoring the whole church, as it were, like a bit like Rich does here. But then there's people on the leadership team who, so I'll look after some of our kind of what I'd call outreach. So our food bank and our community work supporting, we run kind of open cafes for isolated men and support groups for struggling families and kids groups in the midweek just to open the doors, and I'd term that outreach. So I just look after this sort of outreach, and I also get to do a lot of the work to do with, I'll write a little bit of bits about Jesus for people who want to find out more about Jesus, and I'll open the Q&A sessions over sort of a course of 4 weeks. We have pizza and we talk about faith and life and death and all that. So that all kind of comes into my zone. There'll be another guy who looks after kind of more pastoral care and looking after people who are in need at church and our small group. There'll be a guy who looks after sort of Sunday ministry and integrating new people into different teams. So it's really, I feel for Rich. And you wrote what we said. You said something I didn't want you to say. I'll say something. I feel for Rich because I feel quite blessed compared to you that I can just lean into this one zone of the church life and have the luxury of just concentrating on that without having to do a lot of the other stuff that comes with a job like yours. So yeah, that's what it looks like.
And how many people are in your church roughly on average each week for it to be able to support that kind of stuff?
So on a Sunday we have just under 400 people coming. So we split across 2 morning services repeated. About 400, we probably have about 300 who are kind of regular, and then an extra kind of 100 who are kind of visiting or finding out more, or just, you'll probably know this, Rich, there's a big trend at the minute of people just visiting churches. So we are seeing that kind of extra amount of people who aren't our regulars, but are just kind of, at the minute it's something like 50% increase of church attendance in the last 5 to 6 years. Just people coming to find out more. And I guess one of the things I put that statistic down to, and this is national statistics, it's a company called YouGov, who will do all the kind of national trend and polls. They've done this survey, and one of the things they've identified is particularly people who have perhaps grown up with some understanding of church and Christianity in their childhood, but have left that behind and gone, it's not really me anymore, and then have circled back round to go, I think there's something missing in my life. A bit like that constant searching for more. set goals and we achieve the next rung of the ladder and we always do, but there's just something missing. Oh, I remember in my childhood there was something that talks about peace and hope and security and significance and all these things. And so people now are statistically just checking out Sundays. So we're seeing that. I know churches all across the UK are seeing people just come and... I'm not a Christian, but Sundays kind of intrigue me, actually. I'd like to find out more. Yeah. It's quite trendy at the minute. If anybody wants to feel trendy again in their...
It's trendy to come to church.
Yeah, who knew?
Read a Bible, right?
Yeah.
So Bible sales, I'm always banging on about this, aren't I? I get in trouble for banging on about this one. But it's true, Bible sales are up 87% from 2019. So people are buying Bibles and reading them. I was talking with a guy, a football coach, and he's in the gym every week, and he's leaving multiple Bibles every week out there for people to take, and they're all gone at the end of the week, and he's topping up, and people are taking them and reading them. So it is happening, isn't it?
I think people...
It's trendy.
It's trendy, but it's also kind of punk. Like, if you really want to live a punk life, a kind of rebellious, sort of countercultural life...
That's it.
Try church.
That's it.
But also, you know, I think people genuinely are waking up to a hunger and a thirst for more, that they're just finding their lives to be slightly unsatisfactory. Could I really find satisfaction in a faith? And that's why I think we're seeing people start to try out church.
You got one there, Will?
Hello. BBC is a big place, and there's several BBC stations there. Is that connect up with the television stations as well, same building?
Yeah.
Do they have Christian services there?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So the BBC is a vast organisation. You've got all the radio stations from 1 all the way through to 6, all the TV stations, and largely they're in London, loads of it in Manchester as well. All the radio stations will be in one big building together. All the TV kind of output came from a different place. You kind of see it on the TV sometimes when they do the opening credits for like Children in Need or whatever. You see our big glass building, still talk about it like it's our. Give me a minute. Whenever you see the news opening credits and there's like the flashing lines everywhere, and that's kind of where we were, but the flashing lines were computer generated, right? But so yeah, it's all in there. Services, Christian services, nah. Where the building was, there was a church. Honestly, a stone. If you got a good throw, it would be literally a stone's throw. A church called All Souls, and they would put on carol services at lunchtime for BBC workers to come to, and they would open their cafe at lunchtimes for people to come and do the kind of things we've been talking about, ask questions and get to know what's the church about and all that kind of thing. So inside the BBC walls, as it were, there was nothing to do with services, Christian church, nothing like that. In fact, it was quite like, not here, thank you. But what I love is someone in the church, stone's throw away, had the nous to go, we'll open our doors.
That's a vision, isn't it? It's a vision to reach people with the Jesus that you've come to know yourself. Yeah. Any other questions, folks? There's a couple more.
A bit along the lines of the last one. Do you think if you'd have stayed at the BBC, you'd have found it increasingly difficult not to compromise on your faith?
Yeah, thank you. Would I have found it increasingly difficult not to compromise? Really hard to say, isn't it? Any workplace, it can be hard for Christians. Whilst there's so much good about being a Christian, it's also hard. Like you interestingly, we had the Radio 2 breakfast show on the Radio 1 breakfast show. The presenter, Greg James, used to have, I don't know if he does it anymore, but he used to have a feature called Unpopular Opinion. Right? Very good feature. Sometimes, as a Christian, you can end up holding some unpopular opinions, which, whether you're in the celeb world, the BBC or whatever, or broadcasting media, all kind of very, oh yeah, or if you're just at Sainsbury's, or you're doing the local business, you're building your family brand, or whatever job it is, it can be hard to be a Christian. You are living inherently for something different, and some of your values may rub up against other people's values. So would I have found it increasingly hard? That's really hard to say. Is it hard to be a Christian in workplaces? Absolutely. For all kinds of reasons. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, with your connections and your experience, would you see yourself trying to create an opportunity to share your message on radio?
Are you offering there? Is there anybody on a radio station that we know?
You know, I just think you talk very eloquently, and, you know, listening to you both tonight, I think, you know, there is potential opportunity because of your connections, and you could potentially sell the reasons why it would be good. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask.
That's kind. Thank you very much. I love talking about Jesus. I get to do it as a job. I love communicating with people, whether it's in a cafe over coffee, or whether it's to groups of 400 at a church, or whether it's in a little written book. I love to communicate. So any opportunity. I think podcasts are obviously a major way that I don't think there's any. There's not really a world where I can go to the BBC and say, "Hey, can you imagine doing a show about Jesus?" But anyone could do a podcast now. So maybe that's the next kind of. The BBC radio listening in general has started to decrease a little bit, as we've seen Spotify and podcasts absolutely rocket. So maybe there's something in that, and for anybody rich, you know, DJ Turl.
You're not looking at me, are you?
With his own podcast.
When we had the pandemic and I did some videos. My leadership team shared with me, and they said I'd got a great face for radio. And on that bombshell, we're gonna wrap up there, Graham. Thank you. I feel like we should have called it an evening with Graham Albans. We've had an evening of your time. We've had an evening with you and heard about your life. You've been very honest and open with us about all sorts of difficult things and tricky times in your life. So thank you so much for sharing with us. We will find a fibre optic Lincoln Cathedral bit of tack, and we'll get it to you for sure. But thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I would just say again to everyone here, maybe you've come along, maybe a friend's brought you this evening, why not do that trendy punk or whatever it is thing and just come and find out more. People are all across this country just turning up at churches on a Sunday morning, and I'd encourage you to do that here. Come and join us on 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Come and find out more about some of the things that Graham's been talking about, and please take the books, take the cake, take the books, and find out more about this Jesus who has radically changed Graham's life, my life, and many of the folks who are here this evening as well. But thank you for coming, folks. And if you've enjoyed this, come and give us a nudge, and maybe we'll get someone and we'll have another interview soon. If you've got questions for Graham, I know what it's like, you know, microphone and all of that in front of 100 people or whatever it is. Just come and grab him afterwards, and you can chat more and ask anything you like. But thank you for coming out this evening.